Good evening and welcome everybody to the February 18th meeting of the Charter Revision Commission. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6:31. And we'll then do a roll call of members that are here either in person or on Zoom. We have Tyler Fairbairn, Doug Hempstead, John Levin are here in the chambers, Carl Dickens with us on Zoom, Jim Clark, and Joe Bennett. We are going to be missing this evening Rick McQuaid and Tanya Rhodes Small. And we will hopefully see Ed if he's available to join us. We are going to we're going to do the public participation portion of the agenda next. I see two attendees online. Can you please raise your Zoom hand if you would like to speak? Quickly, we have Ed Camacho with us as well. Okay, we're going to start with Diane first, Diane Lauricella.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Diane. How are you?
Okay, I just came in from a brisk walk to stay awake, and now I wanted just to share some thoughts. I first of all wanted to thank you all for volunteering here, and thanks for the virtual option tonight. I wanted to speak on the capital and operating budget processes. I believe I am one of the few residents that have followed both capital and operating budgets for decades, originally due to the fact that I wanted to know why something had not been funded back in the 80s. Since then, I'm more than a self-styled expert on some of this, but I wanted to just share my thoughts about process. Since we do not have an elected Board of Estimate and Taxation, and I do think we should, I think you looked at that, I do think we should have an elected board, but since we don't, I would like you to very much consider the following. For the capital budget, I would like there to be a shift from planning and zoning being the only check or balance, and now their options have been diminished just to whether or not the POCD, Plan of Conservation and Development, is in alignment. I think it should be shifted and some line item controls be shifted to the elected council Land Use and Building Management Committee. Likewise, for operating budget, I'd like, again, because Board of Estimate is not elected, it's appointed right now and probably will never become elected in my lifetime, shift and share the process and line item controls in some way with the elected Council Finance and Claims Committee of the Common Council. I believe this committee should have more than just initial voting about the cap, whether to lift it or not. I think that they, because of their purpose, they should be able to have more power related to the line items of the operating budget. I do want to make sure again, and I was pleased that we shifted to insisting that the public have a public listening session before early on in the process in the early fall. If there's any way that you can commit this into memorial of the charter, please do so. And I thank you. Lastly, I do believe if we can memorialize a full-time grant office underneath the finance department into the charter, then it will not be subjected to the politics that it's been subjected to for decades. Lastly, for Board of Estimate, also because there is a gender equity problem there where they only have one woman on the Board of Estimate. I'm going to be dealing with that in about a half hour under ordinance, but I do feel, again, it should be elected, but since it's not, is there any way that you can include that gender equity must be based upon the census tract, the latest census tract, which will show that there are more than 50% of women who inhabit this fine city. Thank you for your time, and please consider my thoughts on this important item. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diane. We will now call on Rich Bonifant.
Good evening. Rich Bonifant, 17 Park Hill Avenue. You can hear me all right?
Yes, we can, Rich.
Okay, thank you. Forgive me for not showing up in person to participate, but the ordinance committee meeting is pathetically on Zoom only, so I'd have to run home to watch it, right? So please don't even consider compensation to a crew that won't face their constituents in a committee and can vote on items while they are away on vacation sitting on a beach, right? You should have to be present to vote, present in person. 4-year terms should not be considered in a state where there are no term limits or any avenue to recall. You know, the compensation question, how would they phrase that on the ballot? Like, should the Common Council vote on their own compensation if they never meet in person in committees? Look, we know they all have lost touch with their people and their constituents and never have to face them. So hopefully you realize that the pandemic is over and the city starts requiring in-person meetings. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rich. We have one other attendee. I'm not sure if that person wants to speak during the public participation portion, but if so, please raise your Zoom hand. Otherwise, we will close out the public participation portion of this evening's meeting. Okay, we have no one here in person. So, thank you to those who offer their thoughts. The next item up is going to be a presentation. We are fortunate to be joined by Norwalk's CFO, Jared Schmidt, who will be making a presentation on the budget process. Jared, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. So we have some options here. I know the members here, I gave them hard copies of documents. For those of you who are remote, James sent you, emailed to each of you the documents that I'll be referring to tonight. And I can also share my screen and put the document up there as well.
I think that would be very helpful.
All right.
Thank you, Jim.
Just for the record, I actually received them just a moment ago.
Great. All right. I'm going to actually start because the document that I'm displaying starts with the capital budget. So I'm going to start with that document. So for those of you who are here in person, I believe it's going to be the third page of your packet that you have. So what you all have is 5 documents really. There's one that's the capital budget calendar, which shows by date each of the steps in the process. There's another one that has a summary of the proposed changes for the capital budget calendar. And then similarly, the document following that is the operating budget. So the operating budget calendar, and then a document that shows a summary of changes. At the back of your packets is the language of the charter for the budget process. That actually starts with the operating budget. So pardon me for the order of things. They're not perfectly aligned, but I think you have everything you need there. All right. Again, thank you all. For the record, Jared Schmidt, I'm the CFO for the city. And I'm going to start with the capital budget calendar. And what I did was put a little summary of each of the steps along the way. And then if there's a change being proposed, I included that in the blue on the right. And if you need to, the section number is referenced there. So if you have the language from the charter, you can refer back to that as well as we're going along. All right. So, section 1011. This is a requirement that the departments, including the Norwalk Public Schools, submits a 5-year capital plan to the Planning and Zoning Commission and to the CFO. What I'm proposing here is that the dates, which is what we actually started doing this year, that the dates for the capital plan and the documents that are being proposed align more with the operating budget, which means that the documents that are being submitted, the proposals from the departments and from the Board of Education, would be submitted to the CFO by December 15th. I'm also recommending that the mayor be added as a recipient of the documents. Again, this is aligning so that the process for the capital plan is similar to the operating budget. And you'll see where I'm going with this in a couple of minutes. So same documents go to the CFO and to the mayor. I would recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission not be a recipient at this point. It's early in the process. Not the proposals are not recommended proposals at this point. And so for the Planning and Zoning Commission to get them and start their review would be premature because they're not in possession. They won't be in possession of the final recommended proposals. As I mentioned during the last meeting, I'm recommending that we expand from a 5-year plan to a 10-year capital improvement plan. Okay, so that's the first step in the process. That's probably the largest change. So there were a number of things going on there. Next, on or before February 1st, the Chief Financial Officer transmits requests together with recommendations to Common Council, BET, Planning and Zoning Commission, and the recommendation will include a report of the impact on the debt service in the operating budget and various debt ratios. Those debt ratios could be the debt service to budget. They could be our overall debt load. These are things that we typically look at to measure what the impact of the proposals would be. The only recommendation I'm making here is really a conforming recommendation, which would be that it's the mayor's recommended 10-year capital improvement plan. So it's really just the name of the document that's being proposed. Next. So on or before February 15th, Planning and Zoning Commission conducts public hearings on department's requests and prepares a report on the findings of the projects consistent with POCD or not, and submits report to Mayor, Common Council, BET, and CFO. Okay, so there's a couple of things here. One would be that I'd like to clarify what the Planning and Zoning Commission's what their responsibility and their authority is here, which is simply to look at the projects being proposed and how they relate to the POCD and whether or not they're compliant with the POCD. And that what the Planning and Zoning Commission would be looking at that point that would be the mayor's recommended 10-year capital improvement plan. Also to limit the hearings to one rather than multiple. And then there was a change, which would be just to reorder one of the sections of the one of the subsections of that section. On or before March 5th, Planning and Zoning Commission transmits its report with determination of capital budget consistency with the POCD to the mayor, Common Council, BET, and the CFO. The only change that I'm recommending here is that we move the Planning and Zoning Commission's transmittal up to the section before that into 1013, because in that section is where the findings are being made. So just to me, it makes sense that the findings are being made there, and so you would have the transmittal happening there as well in section 10-13 rather than putting it into 10-14. All right. Also on or before March 15th, mayor completes his review and transmits his recommended capital budget. So this is what this really is the mayor taking into account anything that was any notes made by the by Planning and Zoning Commission and incorporating those into the mayor's proposal. And the mayor transmits that that budget to the BET board and also to well, just to them. With this section, I'm sorry, it goes to the BET, to the Planning and Zoning, and also to the Common Council. The Common Council at this point makes their recommendation. Give me 1 second here.
Wouldn't the BET?
Sorry, yes, the BET makes a recommendation. So this is the language here, and this is one of the changes that I'm recommendation. The BET makes a recommendation to the Common Council about what the overall cap should be. So this is kind of where the Common Council and the BET play different roles depending on the budget. In this case, the BET sets the cap for the capital budget. And then it goes to the Common Council for them to potentially make changes to it. What I'm recommending here, the language that you see here will forward the same to the Common Council with an expression in writing of its judgment with respect to the amount of funds it is proposing to expend in such capital budget and the effect of expenditures. So it's not really clear what I don't really understand what that means. My understanding of the intent is, as I said, the BET would be setting the cap and that the Common Council would have to follow that cap. And so that's just a language change really here to clarify what the role of the BET is at this point, and to make it clear that they would be establishing a cap and then going into the next section on or before April 15th, the Common Council has the ability to make adjustments to individual line items within the capital plan. Also here, it's not very clear that they have to operate within the cap that the BET set. And so the change that I would recommend here is to make it very explicit that the Common Council would be required to that any changes that they want to make would have to be overall within the cap set by the BET.
Can I just ask a question? Because I thought it was pretty clear. It says that the council can only approve, reject, reduce, or reinstate any item in the capital budget. Doesn't say anything about increasing it. So wouldn't that be within the cap?
Approve, reject, or reduce.
I think
Or
that's
reinstate?
Yeah, I see what you're saying, Steve. Yeah, so maybe that does comply. It's still, I think it still might be good to just to have some stronger language in there, but
Okay,
yeah, I hear what you're saying. That's a good point.
thank you.
All right.
Can I ask a question very quickly?
Yes,
The in the operating on the operating side of things, the uh the Board of Estimate, I believe, has the option of, although I don't know that this has ever happened, but has the option of requesting that the cap be increased. And that requires then a 2/3 vote of the Common Council, I believe, to increase the cap that they had originally set.
that's all right.
Is there something similar with the capital budget? Where the city council can go back and ask that the BET increase the cap that it originally set?
No.
Okay.
Okay, so the next section, 10-17 is not really a, one of the steps in the process, but it's in this, section of the charter, and this is a substantive change. What this section deals with is the termination and abandonment of capital projects. Require the use of surplus capital authorizations. So, this allows there to be, this would be referring to previous authorizations that were made in the capital budget. And let's say it's been 3 years since that authorization has been made. This allows there to be a termination or abandonment of that authorization. So it doesn't, there's a vote that can happen in order to get rid of that authorization. If for whatever reason they don't have the capacity or it's no longer a viable project, that can be removed. What I'm recommending here is in automatic, instead of that, to do an automatic 4-year sunset provision. So any authorization that there's no action on in 4 years, or any remaining amount of money that there's no action on in 4 years, that it would automatically sunset. So there would have to be a proactive step in the process, presumably the same process that you would follow to adopt something new, to reinstate this. Otherwise, if there's no action taken, then after 4 years, if there's no action on that authorization, it's off the books. It's no longer there. We have a situation now where there are a number of projects that go back several years, that remain as authorized projects, for different reasons. Some of them are for good reasons, some unknown, and it makes it a little bit tricky to analyze our full debt load and look at all the authorizations that are on our books. And so this would be a way to help clean up that part of the process a little bit. This is it's not uncommon. There are other cities. I know Stamford does this, and some other municipalities do this as well.
Would you mind
Mr.
explaining?
Chairman,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'll defer to the commissioner.
I was just going to ask if you would mind explaining to us what having these authorizations on the books, how that impacts credit agencies' review of our like fiscal soundness or whatever.
Can I piggyback on that? When we're talking about authorizations, are we talking about authorizations that have been funded, or they just have been authorized at that point and not funded? That's one of the questions.
So they would be, to that question, unfunded. It would be unfunded authorizations.
Very
anything
good. All right.
Where bonds would not have been issued.
All right.
And that to the other question, So these would be, I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, I was
again?
just wondering if, how credit agencies view
Yes.
unfunded authorizations, basically.
So these, when, one of the biggest measures that I mentioned earlier on is our debt load. And which includes not only, which includes all authorized, principal amounts of capital projects. And so even though we may not have issued bonds for these yet, they do remain as part of the debt load that we're carrying. And, you know, it's an important part of our conversation with our financial advisor, that we have a certain cap that we go by, that we should really try to stay under. Otherwise, it will have it's going to be a negative effect, in the minds of the rating agencies, and could potentially lead to a downgrade in our bonding. And so any of these past authorizations add to that debt load.
One final question. I think I see Joe has her hand up. Is there a reason why you picked a 4-year sunset as opposed to a 5-year sunset to go along with the, you know, as opposed to, I guess the capital plan was 5 years, and I think you're proposing that it be a 10 years, but is there a reason that you picked 4 years for the sunset?
It was a judgment call, right? It's five, for whatever reason, seemed in my mind too long, and that we should really have projects going before 5 years, and that 4 years would be a good starting point. So there was no scientific way of doing this. I know that Stanford's is 4 years. They seem to have seems to work well for them. And so that was the thinking there.
Okay.
Joe, did you have a question?
Oh, so simply what projects are we looking at? I understand that we are looking at, kind of, legislating, what is going on, but what projects are we looking at?
It would be any capital project. So this could be anything from paving to a addition onto a building. It could be the purchase of some capital equipment. It could be a school construction project. Sometimes we make purchases of higher value technology. So pretty much anything that would fall in and be eligible for the capital plan would fall under this, under the sunset provision.
Oh, sorry. You still got more to go through?
Yes.
Okay, then go ahead.
Yep.
I'll wait. I got a cumulative list here.
The next change, okay, so the next step in the process, sorry, these aren't really steps again, these couple here. The authorization of projects for unforeseeable or emergency situations. So these are typically what we would call a special appropriation. And there are, what this section of the charter talks about are different ways of funding these special appropriations. And it talks about using certain quote unquote surplus money from other capital projects. And it also talks about using bond anticipation notes. So those would be short-term notes. What we often do, and this is the change that I would make, which is really not a change to our practice. What we often do is we issue GO bonds for special appropriations. It's not uncommon that we have something come up in You know, sometimes it'll be something like the purchase of a property, the acquisition of a property that wasn't anticipated in the original capital plan, but something that an emergency that came up and we need to purchase a property. And we end up bonding for it for good reason. It's an appropriate capital project. And in those cases, we would typically do a GO bond authorization, and eventually in our next bond issuance, we would issue bonds for that authorization. So the change here would be to add that GO bonds could also be the proceeds of GO bonds could also be the source of funds to fund a special appropriation. The next change is in section 10-23. And it's an authorization and approval of bond issuance, and it goes into details about that process. When we're issuing bonds on the date of the bond sale, we usually convene a group. And the group usually consists of the mayor, myself, the comptroller is there, I believe, as well. Yeah, the comptroller is there, common council president, and the minority leader, as well as the chair of the finance and claims committee. And so, as far as I can see right now, there's not the establishment of a bond sale committee in the charter. And so I think it would be good to codify that, which again, it's our practice now. And so the role of this group is that as we're going through the bond sale, and the auction is completed, and we know who's getting awarded that bond sale, that this group formalizes that sale with a vote of this committee. And then finally, there are a number of sections in chapter 30 of the ordinances that implement what's in the charter here regarding the capital budget, and so there need to be some conforming changes there. And
May I ask, about the bond sale committee? Is it required? I hate to raise a question that came up in the public hearing for them to be present, because I had a very difficult provision in one of my city charters that required the council, the actual common council, to convene at noon on the day of a bond sale. And that's back 20 years ago, and it was problematic. So this would simply be a ratifying action, Jared, that they'd be making, do they need to be physically in the room, or is it a legal meeting that would be convened that could be hybrid or whatever?
Yeah, it's a legal meeting. I know that in talking to our bond counsel about this during our last issuance, they wanted to see it. They wanted to see this group convened and a vote happen.
Right. Who's bond counsel? I normally talk to bond counsel when I'm revising.
It's Shipman Goodwin. It's Matt Ritter.
Is it Matt Ritter?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'll talk to Matt.
Okay.
I've got just sort of one question as well. Is there a reason why the chairman of the BET should not be part of this committee?
No, there's not. I think that would be appropriate as well.
Okay.
So, and just to kind of wrap things up for the capital side of things, and also to give a little context to this process. as compared to the operating budget process. And, you know, I think it is the BET plays an opposite role here than they do in the operating budget, where in the operating budget, the BET, and we'll get into this later, the BET has line item authority, and that they are, in this case, they're the ones setting the cap. And so to me, those two things create a lot of balance because you have the two main entities, the BET and the Common Council, playing opposite roles, depending on which part of the budget you're dealing with, whether it's the operating budget or the capital budget. So I think there's a lot of balance there. And so, you know, to me, that it's an argument for keeping the BET and keeping it the way it is. And, you know, the BET is, it's the only bipartisan board, by charter, that there has to be 3 from each party. And so you're sure to have balance of opinion as well. And so, you know, I just think that the BET is an important piece of both aspects of both avenues of the budget, both the capital and the operating. And the way it's formed right now, you know, it to me, it ensures that there's a diversity of opinion because you have required members of both parties beyond the board. And that's the end of my capital presentation. So I'm happy, Doug, if you have, or if anybody else has questions.
We'll do capital questions while we're still on the topic. Doug.
I got a few. And Steve, you jump into, because some of this gets in the legalese too, if you don't mind.
Okay.
10-15, the way it's presently worded. 10-15 is action by the Board of Investment and Taxation. It says the mayor's proposed capital budget must be transmitted to the Board of Investment and Taxation on before 15th year. The board is then required to approve the capital budget, incorporating therein the recommendations as the mayor, the planning and zoning commission, and the chief financial may make. Well, that almost sounds, if it's gotten to them, they have to prove what was given to them, like it or not. And that usually wasn't the process. Usually the Board of Estimate used to take a whack at it, so they didn't want to fund something. So what we're saying in this, if it's made it through the mayor's office and it's made it through the planning and zoning office, the way I read it, just want to make sure it's correct. They don't have a choice in the matter.
Right, and that's.
So they couldn't say, you know what, that we got a 2 million extra in here and it's really gonna throw us near the limit. What the Moody's or somebody may want us, and they can't do anything about it.
Right, and that's my understanding about the way that they've always operated, that the BET is not authorized to make line item changes.
I'm just making sure it's been rewarded to my day.
Mhm.
So they basically, that's a cap, for lack of a better term, they're putting the cap on the whole.
Right, so when you go to B, that's where the cap comes into play.
Okay. Just making sure there's a way.
Wait, just as a follow-up, so the BET can't come in under the cap? In other words, sorry, no, the BET sets the cap, okay, for the capital budget, right?
Right,
Okay. And so the Common Council couldn't come in under the budget, the cap, sorry.
Well,
so the BET could set the cap. Steve, I guess I'll defer to you on this. It seems like they could set the cap where they want.
Yeah, but the Common Council doesn't have to spend the entire amount, right? The Common Council has line item veto and could come in under the cap, right?
They can reject, reduce, or reinstate,
Yeah.
or approve. So yes, they can
Right,
go.
but I'm
they can
trying to
go
get the flow, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get the flow process because the P and Z decides some department asked for $5 million for something and the mayor said only give them 2. And P and Z gets it. Then no, we should give them the full 5 and they're not touching anything else the mayor recommended it. Then suddenly goes up $3 million.
P and Z doesn't have the authority to make any changes. The only
Doesn't
thing,
have
the way,
authority to
the
what?
way,
No, I'm saying if the ask from the, used to be departments ask for money,
Mhm.
right, in that year. And at the end of the day, you could never give them more than they asked for. Or if they asked for nothing, you couldn't fill in the blanks either unless it went back through the process. The mayor had to ask for it, goes through P and Z. So I'm just trying to say, so if the mayor comes up with an operating budget with, he's suggesting 18 million or whatever it is, all right?
Mhm.
The planning and zoning looks at it and said, no, it really should be 22 because they follow. And they up the ante.
they don't have the authority to do that.
Well, that's why I'm asking, because I'm not seeing that.
Well, all right, what I'm looking at here, we're not talking about operating, we're talking about capital right now.
That's.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm talking about
So
capital,
10
and I think
all right,
that was
10-15
discussed early on.
10-15A, so the mayor submits to the BET his or her proposed capital budget. They're then required, and I think part of the problem you're having is the word approve. That almost sounds like you can mandamus them to approve something. It's really they then act upon the proposed capital budget, incorporating the recommendations as the mayor, P and Z, and the CFO may make. It's difficult language in the sense that, are they able to modify the mayor's capital budget, taking into account other recommendations the mayor made, the P and Z made, and the CFO made, and that becomes the cap? How does this work as a practical matter, Jared?
Well, that's the way I always understood it. The mayor asked for 500,000, somebody asked for 500, mayor gave him 3, and P and Z looked at it and said, no, we want to give them an extra 100,000. Then they passed their budget on to the Board of Investment and Taxation.
So the only way that
Just
that
becomes a-
P and Z would make any kind of changes if they made a recommendation or they found something to be out of compliance with the P O C D.
Oh, I mean,
That would be the only recommendation that they could make.
right, but they could, what I'm trying to make sure I understand is if it's still in play or not, because it's not, it's always been, this is a little bit of trouble. I'm bringing this up because having lived through enough of these that
Okay.
it's always been a little. So the mayor submits, P and Z can take and work it in the framework of the ask. As long as, and it's no obligation to stay to the bottom line. They can go and, you know what, we think the capital budget should be 22 million and not 18 million, which the mayor recommended.
Can we scroll up to 10-15 so we can, it's not on the screen right now. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I think there needs to be clarity how this works.
Yeah.
Because I've been through, like I said, I've been through enough, the Board of Estimate gets it, and they massage all the numbers around too.
Mhm.
So, but it was always understood, if no department asked for any money in that first column, then by the time it gets to the council, nobody can plug a number saying, well, you didn't ask anything, but you asked for it in year 2. We want to give it to you in year 1. It's not doable unless it goes back through the entire process.
Right.
Is that correct?
That's
Okay,
the way I
alright.
would, that's the way I would see it.
So I'm just saying, in that language, it just needs to be, because P and Z, otherwise, why send it to P and Z? If you're, if the
Well,
mayor-
the way I read it is the board, right, the BET is required to approve the capital budget,
Right.
incorporating recommendations
Right.
that the mayor, P and Z, and the CFO will
Right.
make. So if P and Z says, here's what we recommend, the charter current as it is now would give them the authority
do that,
to do that.
right, that's why.
Right, but can't the BET change those numbers? Can't the BET add money or?
Well, that seems unclear. I mean, the way 1015A is written is that the BET can approve the capital budget incorporating the recommendations of those 3 people or bodies, but it doesn't specifically say they themselves can make the changes.
Capital budget, aren't we already at a point, if I may, aren't we at a point where the mayor has taken into account the CFO and the P and Z recommendations? That's the problem with the end of that second sentence. Doesn't the mayor's proposed capital budget take all those things into account? The mayor may leave some P and Z out, the mayor may reject some things that the CFO put in. But then the Board of Estimate has to act on it. And, and so the question is, what is the meaning of those recommendations after the mayor's now proposed a budget?
In my experience, the BET just approves that when it comes to us at that point. Ed, has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, yes, that's typically the experience, but I thought, just like the Common Council had line item control on the operating budget, the Board of Estimate has line item control on the capital budget.
That's the opposite.
So-
It's the opposite.
It's the opposite, Ed.
Opposite.
Oh, sorry, yes, right.
The
Yeah.
council would love to have line item.
Yeah, that's true,
control.
right, so
Yeah.
the Board of Estimate has line item control on the operating budget, not the capital budget, right? So the BT has no choice in the matter
Right.
other than to approve or come in under the number, right? To come in under the budget, the cap.
That's the way how I always understood it and how we acted on the capital budget as
Right.
it was to us.
So this is basically 10-15A is the approval of the cap.
Right.
Yes.
The
Right.
line items are
Yes.
in there, but they're the mayor's line items. And then the common council gets to vote on what stays in. They can't add to it, but they can eliminate.
But the Board of Estimate could set a lower cap than the mayor's recommended cap, I guess is what I'm
Right.
saying.
If they set a lower
Or a
cap,
higher-
then
or a higher
who
cap.
takes the things out of the mayor's budget?
The Common Council.
Common Council would.
So the common,
Board of
okay,
Estimate sets the cap, the mayor makes a recommendation. Mayor's is a recommendation, P and Z is a review of the mayor's recommendations and all the capital requests, and then they sort things out. They pass to the Board of Estimate taxation, Board of Estimate taxation, I see nothing with that. If the mayor said 18, they want to bump it up to 20, they can.
Yeah, that's right.
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 Has that I'm sorry, has that ever happened in practice in your
No.
recollection, Ed?
It's never happened, but I think it's been understood that it can happen, as unlikely as it is to happen, it can happen.
And is that language anywhere in our charter? Because it never, in the 12 years I was there was never an adjustment upward of the cap suggested to us by the mayor.
Well, that's because it's probably not a good idea to throw, to increase, taxes unnecessarily, but
also-
the BT could come in under that number.
Well, here's the thing, the BET is not involved in all the line item discussions for
Correct.
all the capital projects. So we don't have the information usually to make, an intelligent decision regarding raising or lowering the cap from my
Right,
experience.
but the BT sets is concerned about taxes, right? So if they think whatever you want to do, here's 25 million, we're not going to fund 27 because that's going to make a significant difference in taxes. So we're giving you 25, you figure it out.
Fair point,
You want to spend it.
fair point.
I think that the changes that I'm recommending align this with the operating budget in terms of the process. And it would make it, and this is one of the reasons I did it, because it makes it a lot clearer and easier to understand and to follow, because I think people are used to seeing how the operating budget works and maybe are less familiar with the capital budget. And so, I think aligning that and making it run in parallel with the operating budget might simplify things. The only difference would be that the P and Z is involved in the capital process and not the operating budget.
John, did you have a question?
Yeah, a couple questions related to section 1017 and the recommendation for modifying that. Jared, are there examples that you can share of recent capital projects that have been terminated or abandoned?
I'd have to go back and look and see what happened last year. I'm racking my brain, trying to remember if there were any any older authorizations that we may have gotten rid of. I'd have to look, last year was my first year here, and so, I'd have to go back and look at that and see.
Okay, so nothing comes to mind. Is this I'm asking, out of ignorance, is this common or uncommon? Is it highly uncommon for there to be abandonment or termination of a capital
But
project?
can I answer that question, Jared? I think there was an example of, I think recently there was one project that required more money than had been budgeted. And what was done was it was taken out of another project that where I think it'd been funded in some way, or maybe not even funded, but authorized, and that project was either diminished or eliminated, and then those monies were then allocated to the project that didn't have enough money to complete. So I think things like that have happened.
Definitely, yep.
That I'm aware of.
Okay,
That's a good point, thanks.
So the current charter in section 1017 has a very detailed process of how a budget item would be terminated, with written notice from the mayor and the next step and another step. The recommended change indicates a 4-year sunset provision. How would that actually work? What would trigger the sunset if money isn't spent, or it's not completed, or it seems very fuzzy. Can you fill in the details and explain what that means from a practical point of view?
Yep, so it would be if there were surplus funding there, and if the project had been completed and there was excess surplus money that had been authorized, that would be subject to the sunset. If there were a project that was authorized and just never got off the ground for whatever reason, political or capacity, didn't have the expertise to do it, or for whatever reason, that if that project had not been started, then it wouldn't, then that would be subject to the sunset provision. But I do want to be clear, and Steve brought it up earlier. If we had already bonded money, that those projects would not be subject to the sunset. We have to there are different actions that need to take place in order to transfer those funds, and we work with bond counsel in order to do that.
Okay, and if a project is underway, then it would not be subject to this sunset again.
So so I think there may need to be some detail provided here and how it would work. And the way I would imagine this going is, let's say we're in the 3rd year, or going into where projects that might sunset. We in the finance department would produce a report to say, here are the projects that, if you don't take action, are going to sunset within the next 6 months, whatever the timeline is. So we produce that report and probably end up going through the projects and looking at the details of each project and what the status is. If it's in progress and they just need a little bit more time, then there can be a vote to make sure that project continues. That's an example of how it could potentially work.
And the report would go to who?
The report would go to the BET, the Common Council, and also to P&Z.
So at least a year out or so prior to any kind of sunset, everybody would get notice that this is these programs have not been moving forward, and unless something changes, they will be sunsetting a year from now or whatever, some kind of time frame.
Correct.
That's
All right.
different.
So would there be a requirement to actually spell that out in the charter change?
I would suggest that there be language that reflects that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So noted.
So that was my question. Okay.
So
Okay.
noted.
Joe, did you have a question? I saw your hand up earlier.
So I had my hand up earlier because the concern is the fact that we are trying to, you know, our goal is to have a very equitable representation. And I am one of only 2 females who are part of this, and she is not actually part of this conversation. So when we are voting on things, I feel like representation is like, even that much more lacking. And I don't have a solution for it, but I kind of feel like we should address it. Because Norwalk is a city of, I guess 100,000 people. And we know that we have about, 55, percent female representation. And we're not being represented well. Sorry.
Are you on this commission or on the BET, or sorry, Joe, what specifically?
Across the board, but for regarding this commission.
Okay, I mean, I don't know, I mean, we haven't voted on anything yet. I mean, are you suggesting that we don't vote on anything until Tanya is back, or?
Yes, I feel as though we should, because we are not being, represented well, period, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can continue this discussion and ask questions and maybe come up with some suggestions for Steve to make some draft revision language for us all to look at, but I don't know that we're planning to vote on anything specific to this discussion tonight anyway, just because we're still mid-presentation, so I think that's fair.
Thank you.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Jim, yes.
Yes,
Jim.
thank you. This is regarding section 1013. Jared, it says there you wanted to limit the hearings to 1. What discussions did you have that led you to that conclusion that there should only be 1 public hearing?
It's just, when I look at the scope of the P and Z Commission, and there, it's really just to look at the compliance with the POCD. And I'm sorry.
Well, they're conducting public hearings on departments' requests. How many public hearings have there traditionally been?
I think they typically have 1.
So there's only been 1 in the past. So then why did you need to make the language say that it limits hearings to 1?
Again, I just think that the scope of what they do should not require more than 1.
Well, I don't feel so badly about that if there's only been 1 historically, but I know that the request from citizens in general has always been more transparency. So that's why that popped out to me, because it sounded like it sounded from the language you were reducing the number of hearings. So that's what prompted my question. Thank you.
No, I think that's been the practice, has been 1.
And then I have one, this is a general comment. There's a lot in here, and there are a number of places where you said, the needs a language to reflect that intent, and you have that in a number of places. And I know it would be very helpful for me, and I don't know about the other commissioners, if you could actually take a shot at creating that language that you're talking about, so that we have something a little more specific to respond to. Now, if Councilor Mednick feels that's not necessary, then I would defer to him. But I know for me, it would probably be, like say for 1016, needs language to reflect that intent. I mean, I'd love to, since we're dealing with language very much in this charter, it'd be nice to have someone who has expertise like you and your team to take a shot at that language to give us a jumping off point. And that's not just 1015, that's anywhere where you said, language to that effect or needs clarification.
I envisioned working with Attorney Mednick to do that, so he understands the intent, and he's the lawyer, so I assume that between the two of us, we would be able to put together that language. Ultimately, I think it has to be boiled down to language at some point.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, well, if that's a
Commissioner
part,
Clark, yeah, Commissioner Clark, that was absolute my MO. I was going to talk to Jared afterwards, get a sense of where the commission is
Okay.
going, and then sit down with him to try to fill in the blanks and clean up the language.
great, thank you.
Were there, Doug?
No, I don't want to.
I was gonna say, were there any other, capital questions before we move to the operating? Doug and then John? Doug, Doug, then.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, sir.
10-16. So the way I read it, and this becomes a legalese to me that, one, Jim, you brought up an issue about the public hearings. I agree with you, the more public involvement along this process. There is no requirement for the common council to have a public hearing on the capital budget. Never was. Still not there. I'm just, my suggestion was that be included on the adoption of the capital budget or at least discussed, I'm saying, but two, that I agree with Steve saying they have the ability to increase amount that will decrease, but as long as it's not greater than the ask. So that is correct, but then I'm one of those. So if I saw this, I might use it, well, they asked for in the capital budget in the next year, because we have a 5-year plan, 200,000. And the way I read this, any item in the proposed capital budget, you need to define you have to define that so it's specific to the year that they're voting for a particular capital budget. Somebody can wordsmith that. Because if you put a 5-year capital plan in that, then that, to me, I would look like, okay, because the council votes on the 5-year plan, correct?
No,
No, not at all.
no,
Okay, but I'm
they
saying-
vote on
but
the,
it gets presented,
on the
I know, with
ensuing
the
year.
capital budget. So I'm just saying, just put specificity in that.
yeah,
is that
that's fair.
whatever
makes sense.
operating year you're proposing this for is the year, the capital budget you're voting for. I think that would help. And
Let me get clarity on the 10-year plan is not part of the capital budget?
So right now it's a 5-year. My recommendation.
No,
is
I
10,
understand, but we're talking about moving into a 10-year plan. Is the 5-year program of capital expenditures part of the capital budget?
It doesn't get approved. The only thing that gets approved is the ensuing fiscal year.
Oh, where does it get dropped? Because it's proposed to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Does it get dropped there? Because the 5-year program is included, and the POCD report is included in the proposed capital budget.
Yeah, it continues to be presented and to be part of, part of the overall plan, to give context to whatever they are voting on. But the authorization, the resolution that gets adopted is only to approve the ensuing fiscal year. I don't know, Steve, the answer to your question specifically, but it does, those following 4 years continue to be part of the conversation and part of the debate among, whether it's in the BT or the Common Council, but it's not part of what gets approved in the end.
And the 10-23, which is the last one you brought up, which is in existence, always has been. But are you suggesting that they basically approve the bonding? It used to be that their job was to sit there, listen to what was open for interest rates and basically approve the ones that had the best interest rates for bonding, but then it went to the full council for approval, because I don't know how that group is not the legislative body that can authorize the mayor to sign a bonding issue. I know as you sell bonds.
The authorization to issue bonds
Right.
would already have been approved before that time. This
Okay.
is the way I look at this is to approve that bid. to approve that award of the bond sale to that particular firm that won the bid. That's how I look at it. Because all the other authorizations have been made by that time.
Okay.
So when the authorization is made, this committee, the bond sale committee is being authorized to approve an award.
Right.
All right.
If I may, regarding 1023, my only concern is that you have a specific date that this has to be approved, and that concerns me a bit. Just the language of that, that's all. Mr. Bendick, do you think there's any way to massage that?
Where are you seeing
There's a
that?
specific date. What,
1023, it says,
No, that's a section number.
1023, approve or reject the winning bids on the date of the bond sale.
That's the section number of the charter,
Right.
yeah, no, I got it.
Yeah.
not the date.
No, I'm just
No,
talking
I know.
about the language within the proposed change.
Oh, are you looking at the proposed change? I'm looking at the language itself. Okay,
No,
I'm sorry.
no, because I don't have the actual charter in front of me. I have his proposal here.
All right,
Do you
sorry.
see what I'm saying there? That 1023 is that's the charter section, not the date.
Correct.
There is
Sorry.
no,
It's simply the date of the bond
The date.
sale, Jim.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
on the date that the bond sale goes out, this group convenes, and upon completion, they approve the award to the company that,
understood. So Counselor, you see no issue that it has to happen on that exact date of the bond sale. I'm just,
well, it sounds like that's what they want to do. Jim, what I'll do is I'll talk to bond counsel. It doesn't surprise me that is what they want to do.
right.
Does it make
Nor
sense?
I.
When else would they do it?
Right, and it doesn't, I remember I think Doug brought up a little while ago about how hard it was to get people together at certain times, and that's why that popped out at me. So if the language is such that it can happen on that date, but anyway, point made.
Yeah.
The only thing I would suggest, because you were getting, I heard a little bit of pushback from the council members, that gets communicated immediately to the Board of Instrument Taxation and the Common Council once that it's adopted. Because if I heard right, you said the council was looking for, they felt they needed to vote on this, correct?
No, I don't think
Okay.
that.
I thought,
no.
may have read it somewhere that they were from. I just think you should have a communication effort in there because it's pretty important I know they vote for the issuance of the bonds, but it's more important to also find out what percentage you just issued them for and to whom.
Got it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sure. John?
Most of my questions were relating to section 1023, also the bond sale committee and its role. And those have been answered, except for one. Jared, earlier when you were introducing this proposed change, you had made some reference to possibly considering a minority party representation requirement. Given that it is the committee will be staffed by these specific individuals, mayor, CFO, Common Council President, Minority Leader, Chair of the Finance and Claims Committee, and also the Chair of the BET. It doesn't really seem practical. I mean, if all of these individuals are of one party or another, it does not, it doesn't seem applicable, in my view. And also, quite frankly, awarding a bond sale to a winning bidding firm should be pretty darn apolitical, and I don't really see any particular need for minority party representation consideration for this particular application.
Okay.
I disagree. Having been on both sides
Okay.
at that meeting.
Okay, so if nobody else has, capital questions, we'll move on to the operating portion, Jared, of your, presentation.
Yep.
Okay.
This will be much quicker. Oh, all right. The operating budget process starts very early. First week of September, we publish a calendar, which includes some rules, all the procedural rules about the process. On or before October 1st, this is a new provision that was during the first round, the first phase of the charter revision was added. So this is a joint public hearing between the members that are listed there. And this is basically me, the CFO of the schools, superintendent, mayor. We before going into the budget development process, just lay out the situation. We give a preview of what, challenges that we might face, and anything that's transpired since the budget was adopted, since the previous budget was adopted, that may be applicable to the development of the new budget. So as we were looking at this, one of the things that stood out was that the superintendent and the public school CFO are not members of this group as it's currently written. So I'm recommending that they be added to the group. On or before December 15th, the city departments and Board of Education filed their operating budget requests with the mayor or his designee. Typically, these go to me and to the budget director, Tom Ellis, so that we can begin our process. On or before the January 21st. This is similar to the public hearing that's happening before October 1st, but it's another joint session, and this would be a new section. Trying to get the Common Council involved in the process earlier, and understanding the context and the situation before the budget actually gets recommended. So this is something that is already happening as well, happened this year. And we're just proposing that we codify it into the charter. Next, on or before February 15th, the mayor's designee submits the recommended operating budget and tax levy in addition to the department request to the Board of Estimate and Taxation. I'm going to take these next two as one because I do think they're tied or should be tied together. And then it says in the next step, on or before February 22nd, we have to submit the budget to the Common Council. I don't know why there are two different dates for those two. It seems like it would make sense just that we would transmit the budget, submit the budget to both the BET and the Common Council at the same time. And it allows us to do that, certainly, but this would make it explicit. And then that the kind of separately would be a presentation from me, from the CFO, to both the Common Council and the BET, but separately. Just as I did last week. So we had the BET on Monday, and then the very next day on Tuesday, presented to the Common Council. And then 5 days before the fourth Monday, CFO or mayor's designee publishes the recommended budget. This is where we have to put public notice into the newspaper. On or before February 28th, Common Council establishes the maximum appropriation limit and communicates the limit to the BET. So again, you see the reversal of roles here, where the Common Council is now setting the limit on the operating side, and then submitting that to the BET. On or before March 30th. So this happens really throughout the month of March, usually starting the first or second week. And there are, maybe 5 or 6 different meetings with the department heads throughout the month, where the BET is reviewing the budgets in detail. And the BET can make budget adjustments. On or before April 1st, the BET prepares a statement of appropriations and related tax rates and forwards a statement to the Common Council. So at that point, now the Common Council has the recommendation of the BET. They have the option to set the maximum appropriation again, to change it. That requires a 2/3 vote. This is, that's what Ed was referring to earlier in the conversation. On or before April 30th, the BET alters the budget to comply with the new maximum appropriation limit if it's necessary. So if the Common Council had the 2/3 vote and change the limit, then there may need to be alterations depending on what the change was. And on or before, again, April 30th, the BET publishes approved budget. So that's where there has to be public notification with the newspaper. And then finally, on or before the May 7th, the BET sets the final operating budget and tax levy, as well as the frequency of tax bill payments. I mentioned this is kind of a technical thing, but the state statute allows 1, 2, or 4 installments of payments. And I think the charter refers to multiple installments. So either Steve, if you want to take a look at that, if you think there needs to be changes, then I'll defer to you on that. Just to sync the payment installments with what's in
Sure.
statute.
Okay, thank you. Yep. And that would be a reason for that. It is a pretty technical vote, but they do have a little discretion.
Yep. So that's it on the operating side.
Can I ask, Mr. Chair, 2 technical questions before the commission starts?
Please.
Why this budget is completed very early compared to a lot of other large cities? A lot of other larger city budgets usually are closer. May 7th is probably close to the short session of the General Assembly. A lot of municipalities push their budgets as late in May and early June as possible to see what's coming from the General Assembly. Is there a reason why historically, and I remember 2 years ago when we were doing this, I was puzzled by it. And I know you're new, Jared, but do you have any thoughts on why this budget is approved so early comparatively? I mean, the old days, the rationale for doing it in early June, I was chair of the Finance Committee of the Board of Alders for many years, was we had to get the tax bills out. Now the tax bills are much easier to do technologically now than it was in the 1980s. But why May 7th? And I'm not arguing against it. I'm just curious whether you know anything about the history.
I don't know the history, but I had the same thought that you did. It was a matter of timing and getting tax bills out, and also that in that process, there are very few companies in Connecticut that do that, so they're getting bombarded with, with every municipality wanting to send their tax bills out. And so, technologically, I think you're right, but you practically speaking, and given the supply of firms that do it, it may create a crunch on them. And so for us to do it earlier might make sense. So we're out of the throes of all the other municipalities hitting them toward the end of the process, and it potentially being an issue with getting bills out in time.
Okay. And my other technical question, so 10.5A, the max is set by the council. 10.6, the Board of Estimate has its deliberations. And remember, we had this language on the capital side, but it's a little different here because here the board may make alterations, increases and decreases in the mayor's proposed budget and make the additional appropriations as it deems proper. Are those appropriations within the max limit under 10.5A?
Yes, that's the way I would read it.
Okay. I just want to make sure because it was not clear. That's good to know. And then, and that kind of answers my question because my next question was 10-7. I was wondering whether the amendment of the max limit might be a result if 10.6, they weren't stuck within the max limit. They are confined to the max limit in 10.6. And so that the 2/3 to increase the max limit is independent of that decision then. Okay, then I've answered my own question. Thank you.
Yep.
Did anybody, any of the commissioners have questions for Mr. Schmidt on the operating portion?
I think it's gonna be shy. I'm curious about a couple of things, and some of this it's been rewritten. And I can only express what I thought I heard from some of the council members at the meeting, that they wanted more involvement with this process, but nothing prohibits them from putting a meeting together. You're codifying what I actually started was the meeting with the Board of Ed. It was never done before. But it was never codified. I use it as the chairmanship of a particular committee and I moved it forward. I'm only bringing that up because number one, there's a section now about public record, public engagement. There's no requirement here for the Common Council to have a hearing on setting the cap. None. You're in one section, talk about public engagement, not you, but the charter changes asked for it. And then there's no requirement for the Common Council to have a public hearing before voting on the cap. I think that's appropriate to be somewhere in this, but here comes the dilemma, which I think is what some of the council members are complaining, and I certainly used to complain about. You got a week. Make a decision about the cap. I've been here where they plop the book on your desk without even going over it. Have a nice day. You got to figure this out. What if you're in the minority? Is there anything more problematic than if you're in the majority? I believe that process and that date change needs to be widened. Basically, now you got 7 days. That's a little tough to deliberate because the process, the way I'm reading it now, is they do have a joint public hearing, but it's in October.
I think
Right?
that's the first one.
Yeah, there's no second one after that.
Right.
That's it. So that's very early on in the process. Now you're setting a cap, which is really controls the Board of Investment and Taxation and funding. They can lower it, but they can't hire it without their authorization. That it would be nice to do a purview of what dates can move to at least give the council a couple weeks, not 1 week, because it says the 15th, they got to vote on the 28th.
So I think there's two questions there. One having to do when the council sees the budget, and then one about the public hearing. I'll say
The
with
presentation of the budget.
with the change that I'm proposing, the council would have it on the 15th. Would receive the
And they have
budget
to vote by
on the 15th.
It's 13 day,
They have to,
counting weekday.
on the 28th, they have to vote on the cap.
Okay.
Doug, do you have another one? You need that one.
Well, those are two, those are the, two ones that made it, to me, was just about the timeline and the limited appropriations, just so it's clear, though, I think I had, for clarity's sake, I was just gonna say that the council can vote to increase the cap, but the board of estimate can tell them to basically go pound sand.
Sure, the
It's not
board,
required that board of investment pay,
No.
spend the additional funds.
no,
Just- So other members, if we're not familiar with the process,
that's true. Yep.
Okay. John, did you have a, you don't?
No.
Any of our online commissioners, any questions for Mr. Schmidt on the operating portion?
No, but thank you, Doug, for pointing that out, but that time needed for the council. I think that was a very important point, and I did not realize it was so short. Thank you. And it's not as short now, proposed, which is good.
I think, one thing to keep in mind when you're considering that is that because it's their charge only to the common council's charge only to vote for a cap. I don't think there's an expectation that they're digging in deep and looking at a lot of specific line items. In my mind, they're looking at, okay, what's going on? How is this hitting taxpayers? What's generally speaking, what are the needs of the Board of Education? And so I don't know that it's that they'd be expected to do a deep dive into a lot of the details of the budget.
But Jared, to respond to your comment, when should they be expected to do that?
Well, again, they're getting it with my change, they would get it on the 15th, and then they would have till the 28th.
Right. But
To
you're
look at
saying,
those.
they don't have to do a deep dive during that time?
I'm not saying they do or don't. I'm just saying that given what their task is, which is to vote for a cap of a certain amount, that they may not need to go do a deep dive into each line item of the budget like the BET does. And also because they don't have the authority to make changes to each of the line item of the budget. That's all I'm saying.
I would suggest, I'd ask Doug or any other former common council member to respond to that comment. Because I've never been a common council.
well, yeah, I'll respond to it. Are you kidding me? I took my job very seriously, so I went through a lot of lines and we opened the dialogue with even the Board of, like I said, the Board of Education. So we looked at certain departments, certain issues and certain expenditures. We questioned, we looked at, we're spending too much, can we take 100,000 out of this department, what does it affect? Somebody asked for 15 people, what happens if we only get 12? Because I've been involved where we've taken the cap recommendations and lowered it by $1 million, $1.2 million. So I believe in the deep dive, that's my responsibility, because I'm voting on what the city can spend, and if it's a constraining budget, not a, if it's open-ended, it's one thing, but when you're constraining that you have to operate within this, that's a pretty serious.
I'm making a
And
statement about what might be the rationale for it and why there's not a larger amount of time, why there's not a longer, as far as, I don't know how long this has been the process. I'm just kind of inferring why I think it's that way.
It's actually, it's always unfortunately been this way. But it used to be, which is concerning to me, because I just realized that you said by the 15th. So if you were presenting the budget by the 15th of February this year, that would have been on a Saturday. It used to be, you at least had to give it to the first meeting in February of the council, which would have been the second Tuesday of the month. And then the council by the end of the month, had whether they did a special meeting or not by the end of the month. So I think probably best practices would be to give it at their first meeting, because by the charter, they have to meet this second Tuesday of every month. Unless that got changed last time.
think that makes sense.
How do you deliver on the 15th? You gotta figure
Right.
my hand, I don't know, you know.
Good point.
I'm not, you know, it should be the council at least get presented the budget by the first of what's the first, second Monday, first Monday, whatever it is.
Well, that's why we say on or before. So if it falls on a weekend, then it would be, we move it forward to a Friday or a Thursday.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think it should be the first minimum, first council meeting of the month. That's always we got presented. That's always how previously we were presented with it.
Okay.
And I think that's the way it is now, is it not?
Now it's what you see there. That's the.
Does
this-
the council
this
already
is
have the
This is the
operating
way it
budget?
is, that it would,
Does the council have the operating budget?
the
Already?
count, so the council has seen it. They've had it with the presentation. Yes. They had it last Tuesday.
There you go. And that was the second Tuesday of the month.
Sure.
Any other questions? If not,
I just have one comment, Mr. Chairman. In general, I noticed here in this, for example, when he's talking about the section 10.4, it says 5 days before the fourth Monday. And now, because of Doug's comment, I wonder if any of these other things should be written in a way that it takes into account, for example, when common council meetings are. So we can make sure that we're building in enough time as we can get, you know, for meetings to happen and have time between them. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but that's just my thought here. Thank you.
And in terms of your question, Jim, earlier about the 2 weeks for the common council and the BET gets in, you know, a few weeks. I don't believe that the common council meets with department heads the way that the Board of Estimate do. They may, I'm not sure, but as I recall, they don't. And they can recommend to the CFO, you know, increasing here or reducing there or adding something there. But at the end of the day, it's a recommendation. And whereas the BET actually can, you know, can veto certain items or can, you know,
Right.
shift things around on its own without having to recommend anything. So I think that might account for some of the difference between the time that the BET has and the Common Council has with the budget.
That makes sense.
Jared, did you have anything else or you?
No, I'm all set.
Oh, good. Well, thank you again for joining us. I think this was enormously helpful for this part of our process.
Good.
And I will, we'll discuss it a bit after this, but you know, I'll check back with Steve and you know, as you mentioned, you and him can kind of iron out some of the language for the proposals.
Sounds good. Thank you all.
Thank you again.
Thanks
Thank
for-
you.
Thank you.
All right, so I think, you know, I think what probably makes sense, given the time is, if anyone has any suggestions, right? I mean, we discussed this with Steve. I mean, thus far, there hasn't really been any direction from the commission for him to, you know, put together any language that, you know, proposed language that we would like to see related to things. So if anyone has any, you know, particular section or topic that we would like to have Steve look at and give us something to review and mark up and discuss at a future meeting related to this portion, we can go over that now and then, you know, I'll follow up with Steve in the interim before our next meeting. Doug?
I'd like to see a couple scenarios for the minority representation issue. There were several options discussed. There's several, and we heard a lot of the way other communities do it and how they're set up. I'd like to at least have 3 scenarios possibly. That way, at least we have some point of discussion about it.
Right. No, I think we're good. Thank you, Jim. Take care.
So I'm confused. You were asking for commissioners' input regarding what we just discussed or everything we've discussed today?
Things we've discussed today.
Okay,
I mean, this is, I mean, I think it might, we might maybe take a week or so to digest this, and then, I think it might be a little too early to come up with anyone's suggested revisions specific to this. But if you had other things, John, that we were looking to come up with draft language on, I think now's probably the time to get going on that.
okay. As you know, I had made a request to make changes to, oh gosh, now I gotta find it. The referendum appeal process in section 4 of the charter. And I know that was included in the memo that I circulated. Oh yeah, it's section 4-10. So there was the email that I sent a couple weeks ago, last month, that referenced section 4-10 and requested specific changes, really just to the thresholds involved in this referendum procedure.
Would you explain that? Because I don't think I saw the email.
Okay, it was sent to every commissioner.
I'm sure I got it. I just haven't seen
Right.
it.
So that means I have to find it. And I thought it would be in my notes, and I am not finding it.
But just a general idea of what you're referring
Oh,
to.
sure. If you look at section 4-10, this discusses the opportunity of citizens to ask for a referendum to appeal any ordinance passed by the council that they don't like. And the thresholds, I don't know when they were last changed. Doug might know the history better. But currently, one of the requirements, there's several, they include a requirement that 8% of the electors of the city be included in a referendum petition. And the suggestion that I made was to lower the 8% threshold to 5%. And I think I'm hoping that I included the actual background of numbers. But the 8% threshold is pretty high. I think we have what, 56,000 registered voters in Norwalk, is that right? Something like that, I believe. So 8% of that number is going to be close to 5,000 and reducing, it's a high hurdle. I mean, obviously, if somebody is determined enough to appeal an ordinance in this way, it's a very, very high hurdle. And I would just simply suggest lowering it. Also, I suggested extending the 25-day limit for collecting those signatures to a longer period of time.
Can I just, it seems that with a lower threshold that just about any ordinance can be relitigated over and over. I mean, things can be relitigated over and over again. Because I'm sure you're going to get 5,000 people who are going to, have a problem with an ordinance here or there, but that doesn't, then we're going to have a vote and on every single one that of these things that 5,000 people feel to be problematic. I think that's a little unwieldy.
I don't understand.
Well, you have a representative democracy. You have elected officials. You have people on the Common Council. They have a process which includes a public comment, et cetera. They go back and they represent the districts and so on and so forth. And so I'm assuming that any ordinance that is passed, or many or a significant portion of ordinances that are passed, will be opposed by at least 5,000 people. I think that's probably a given. And with the elections in Norwalk the way they are, 54 to 46 usually, I think it's a safe bet that you're gonna, depending on the nature of the ordinance, like the leaf blowing ordinance, you're gonna get the 5,000, 6,000 people that are gonna oppose it. So it seems to me that if you subject ordinances to a lower threshold of referendum appeal, that you're inviting a lot of referendums.
I don't really see any evidence to support that view. When was the last time that an ordinance was appealed in Norwalk?
Well, the point is that it's the threshold you say is too high.
I
wanna
think
lower.
that I think it is respectful to whoever the aggrieved voter constituency is to lower the threshold.
Okay,
And I would point out, because you correctly point out that there have been unhappy constituents with one or more ordinances, and yet there have been no referendums. So,
but if you lower the threshold, there might be more. That's what I'm saying.
and how is that a bad thing?
It
Again,
becomes unwieldy. It could become problematic. It's, you're going to subject a lot more things to a referendum than I think, it's an expense to the city. You have to have elections and so on and so forth. It could become a little much if enough people oppose an ordinance that you can get 5,000 signatures. Then I think that's a good number.
Okay, it could, but right now, the number of referenda that seems to appear in the city is exactly zero. Again, the question repeats, when was the last time a referendum came before the city appealing an ordinance?
And the answer repeats. Perhaps it's because the threshold is just right.
If I can interject with
Okay, if your goal is to have zero referenda, then raise the threshold. Again, I think what you really, really want to do is simply have enough respect for the voters and the residents of Norwalk that, if they're unhappy about something, they have some recourse.
Well, they can vote the bums out after 2 years. I mean, we have elections every 2 years in Norwalk.
Understood, but again, we have this feature in place. And it again is to provide recourse to electors, separate from evicting the incumbent council, which I think is a pretty high threshold. But I don't really see the problem with, if there is such a determined effort to gather, let's say, 4,000 signatures instead of 5,000, that, maybe the people should actually be entitled to have their request heard and allow the voters to decide.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I have a question and a comment that kind of goes along with this dialogue.
Sure.
My bigger concern, and I think Ed's right, I think John's right, depending on the number. I'm not sure the number really matters, because my bigger concern is how many people really know what ordinances are up that would get people's hackles up enough to want to cause a referendum on anything. Because there's really no communication, from my point of view, in the city to the electorate, the residents, whatever, about anything that's going on at City Hall. And it's not a political statement. That's not geared toward anybody. So whether you have 8,000 people that has to be gathered and signatures signed, or 3,000, I don't think there's enough people that know about what's going on.
I think that's true.
And that's a concern, because, and that leads to why my hand is up, and then I'll be quiet, is that we discussed tonight and heard, in both of the budget proposals and the language, that public hearings have to be held. The mayor just did a thing, a couple of weeks ago, where the state of the city on the budget, to talk about the budget. What is it? In the Great Hall, 10 people showed up, I think, and then no one online. So I don't know who's responsible within the city government to get the word out to the populace that there's something important that they need to know about and pay attention to. I'm not sure who that is. If it's the communication director for the city, I'm not sure whether it falls, and Ed, you were a council person, Doug, you're a former council person, to interact with your constituents and say, hey, blah, blah, blah. I don't know, I know everybody's pressed for time. I'm just concerned that there's a lot of things that the citizens of this town don't even know enough about or don't even know what's going on to speak up. That's my concern.
I think there's, not just in Norwalk, but throughout the country, I think there's a voter apathy. I think a much smaller percentage of people vote than are registered to vote in Norwalk.
But Ed, I'm not talking about voting. I'm talking
but I
about,
mean,
I'm talking about being informed.
Right. So, I don't think that people are in the weeds, that the average, that John Q citizen is in the weeds about this stuff as much as we are. And I think that's just systemic. I think that's,
I don't disagree. So one of the things I would ask for the fellow commissioners, I would welcome you sending me, and I'll take Mr. Chair and organize them and share with everybody. I would want thoughts from everybody. How do we do a better job of communicating, not just this commission? How do we do a better job of communicating to the citizens of Norwalk? Maybe we go back to a town crier, we meet on the city green.
I think that's, that's the job of a free press,
Well, we don't have one. That's a problem.
That's true. That is true.
And having spent 45 years of my life in that business, it is a problem in this town. Anyway, that's my concern. And I don't have the answers. I don't know if there's things that could be, ever when there's something really important, if any communications that's sent to a household on a regular basis, a monthly basis or whatever, whether it's about anything, right? It's people's water bills, this or that, whatever it might be, if there's something included in that, or is there something set aside that there are direct mail pieces sent out about it? I don't know the answer. That's why I'm asking whatever anybody could think about. How do we do a better job of letting people know?
Well, I can tell you, Carl, that with the leaf blower ordinance that I was a part of, every landscaper known to Norwalk was at that was at that meeting of the full common council when a vote was to take place on that. And so it probably depends on the ordinance itself. That was a pretty high profile one. I don't know that many of the things that go through ordinance are that type of thing that it's going to draw any attention, but I see your point.
Yeah, I'd like to do.
I mean, that was a hot topic, there's no doubt. And I happen to be chair of the Oak Hills committee when that first aired, started coming up.
Yeah.
And there was apathy even amongst members about going talking to people and so on and so forth. I got email from different people talking about it. And then some people who had businesses regarding, oh, what's this going to do if I can't use the gasoline blower and blah, 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 blah. But I hear you, Ed. You're absolutely right. That's the stigma or the hurdle. I don't know how we get over it. I mean, we do have a thing that's set up for red alerts for weather and that kind of thing. I mean, is that a possibility? Where there is a mass communication that comes from the city to everybody on their cell phone or their email or something that alerts them this is something they should be looking at, and this is when they can voice their opinion? I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
It's a hard thing, Carl, for sure. And I think, if we're able to figure this, someone figures this out, please let me know as well, because this is for my entire career, writing plans for communities. We tried to get people out. I remember I wrote a plan in Bridgeport 10 years ago that it was, dictating how millions and millions of dollars were going to be spent in the community for low-income people. We hired a consultant, we did ads with public meetings at different times. Biggest city in the state, I think 6 people came on a Saturday, right? When you're not at work or school. So I think it depends very much on the issue and how it impacts people and how engaged they're going to be. But specific to this thing, right? The reduction from 8 to 5%. I don't know that that's something that requires Steve to write it up. I mean, you're changing the number. So, I think that's something for us to discuss and vote on a different time. And I think to Joe's point, Perhaps if we wait until we have our full committee here before we vote on something like that, but I don't know that we need to draft any language. We're gonna debate whether it should be 8 or 5 or some other number.
I agree. I think you could just pick a number and things probably not gonna change much until we or other people that are active in the community on these things, figure out a way to let, the members of the community know about stuff. And I would love to see what you wrote, for Bridgeport.
Probably still online somewhere. See if I can find the link.
If
The
you
answer
find,
to the que-
if
there
you
was a-
find it, I promise you I will unblock your email. No, I'm kidding. But I would love to see it.
In answer to your question, 1988 was the last time I can recall a referendum. It's when the council split the planning and zoning. Referendum petition was taken out. It did go to the public vote, but it didn't meet the minimum requirements of how many elect or percentage. to be. So
Okay.
It stood. This is getting to be ancient history for me, so things get a little blended, so I'm being upfront. But as far as I know, the reason the referendum used to be more constrained within the charter, and it was expanded at one time to cover more areas. It was very specific. You'd only take a petition out on X.
Okay.
That's going history. It was in span, with that became the concern is when you look at the regulations, somebody comes in and files a petition, everything comes to a halt.
Yeah.
So the question was, the threshold was a lot, I think, lower. And the problem was you could have, back in those days, because it was based on it's based on a percentage or versus a number, that you could have a very small group holding up government all over the place, trying to enact ordinances.
Right.
So at that time, I can't recall, however, the number came, they came up with at the time, that's the number that they essentially, they wanted to make it a high bar, but not too high a bar that is totally unattainable, along with how many people have to show up to vote for this percentage of the elected. So.
Do you remember what the
That's my
referendum was?
historical recollection on this.
Doug, do you remember what it was, what the referendum was?
Yeah, plenty of the planning and zoning.
Oh, you did say that. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
That struck a chord with some people then, obviously.
I got a lot of people out, that's for sure.
Stephen, how do other towns that you work with handle communication to their citizens?
I was just looking something up, the little town of Salem. I'm doing a charter revision in Salem. Salem has around 5,000 people in the entire town. And they have been trying desperately to, they actually did a poll, and I think they got maybe a couple hundred people respond. They went online, they had mail delivered to people's homes. They did everything. And, I think that's probably fewer people than there are in a district in Norwalk. And they're having the same kind of problem trying to get people to come out. Tyler is 100% right. And I don't know what the answer is any longer. I just think you have to continue to communicate as much as you can. To Carl's point, I live in Hamden. I'm just over the line from New Haven, so I have a New Haven Exchange telephone number. So I get messages about snow removal from the mayor of New Haven all the time. And so I don't know if you start calling people and saying there's an ordinance on such and such, this is the mayor, and I urge you to call the city council, whether people will just pick it up and hang up, or whether it actually will get through to people. But that's, it just seems to me when there's an emergency and that's what they're trying to do, they made a judgment call that was the thing to do. So I don't know how you do it, how you get people out of their shells and out of their homes to come downtown or to even come online. In fact, it's quite interesting. I don't know if anybody else had this experience, but I do a lot of meetings. And during the pandemic, I think there was a huge uptick in public participation on remote meetings, where people really did participate. They tuned in. Whether they spoke more or not is another question, but they tuned in.
Right.
The other thing I will tell you that in the last decade, let's exclude the pandemic, take those 2 or 3 years out of the equation. The largest crowds that I have seen at any meeting was after a police shooting in the town of Hamden. where hundreds and hundreds of people came out. Whether they were invited or not, they came out. It was a very huge emotional outcry that had to be dealt with in a variety of ways. But that's the last time that I've seen a really large crowd scene. It was pre-pandemic, and that was the issue that brought people out. You'll get some issues. I'm trying to think. Most recently, some tenant issues. You bring tenants out on tenants' rights issues. But again, we're talking about 4, 5, 8, 10 of the activists. But the last mass public outcry that I have seen in local government, to my knowledge, and the things I'm involved in the 7 or 8 communities that I do a lot of time in, I'm sorry, I sound like a recidivist. Is the police shooting in Hamden about 7 years ago.
It's always about an issue.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's gotta be something that is, something tangible, right? Somebody's shot, somebody's allowed to use a leaf blower, now they're not allowed to use a leaf blower. I remember there's a huge uproar when they changed the middle school lottery process, and, it's like something you can grasp, I think, and, everyone here knows the importance of it, but, if you're watching this or listening to it, I mean, how many people care what date the budget lands on P and Z's, it's tougher to grasp when it's something a little more.
It's, and even when it's something like we're in the process of losing our democracy, I don't think a whole lot of people still care about that either. So it's
I can go back to 2008,
It's a big question.
2009, in the middle of the Great Recession, where the revenues were dropping like a bullet, and we're saying to the Board of Ed, you're not getting an increase. So we filled the high school auditorium, both levels, with screaming people saying we hate kids and all that kind of stuff. This was 2008, folks.
Yeah.
This was not so it's usually issue oriented. It's got to be something big enough.
An issue that.
And they have probably the parents in that, well, it's a little more challenged nowadays, but they probably have the best networking school systems.
Well, I would think that with the fact that, our property taxes are gonna go up and more money is needed to run the city.
Right.
And I could get political on a couple other things, but I will not. And Stephen, I do this just for you.
Thank you, Fred.
That's quite all right. But what I'm saying is that I think the pocketbook is important to people. And even though, you talk about the budget, the operating and so on and so forth, if there's more money going to be paid by me and it's got to go into the city and the city's going to be doing projects, this, that, whatever it may or may not be, I think that people are going to be interested in knowing what that money is going to be used for. That's the basic premise. And I think it's incumbent upon every council person. I think it's incumbent upon every person that sits on committees to see that the people that's going to affect, and it's each and every one of us, plus the rest of the citizens, at least know about it. They choose not to come, there's nothing we can do, because there is a lot of apathy when it comes to that. There's no doubt.
No, agreed. All right, so
I got one request for Steve.
please.
All right, sorry. You never got to get home. before
No, we're gonna
8:30.
make it happen.
No, Steve, I've been asking since day one, and as part of the analysis of whether or not the minority representation was one of the things about increasing the council membership, but that did come up early on. I've asked if you could find out historically what years we were at what. We were 13.
I have not. In fact, Rick McQuaid and I talked about that because I think you'd have to go back and look at all of the charters. Let me talk to Rick tomorrow about that. Rick was also, we talked last week, I'm sorry he's not here today. We were also going to look at the voter registration numbers in the various new districts. They were waiting for the Democratic registrar to return. So I'll try to do that. But Doug, I did not ignore that. It's just that I think physically I'd have to go look at each of your charters. And I assume they're somewhere in the town clerk's office. And that's one of my physical limitations. So I will talk to Rick and see if there's somebody in City Hall who can take a look at the charters.
Thank you very much.
Well, so I think for now, let's leave it at minority party representation and the council size. And then, Steve, I can check in with you to just kind of see where you and Jared are with some of his suggestions. I mean, we're obviously we don't want to vote on anything until we have everybody here. But these are some discussions that we can continue next time, once we have a little additional
If there,
background.
if there is no objection, Mr. Chair, I will talk to Jared. I'll try to put meat on the bones of his proposals tonight. So you can actually, since he has actually proposed the language, we can actually see what it looks like
Okay.
when you debate it.
I think that would be helpful. I mean, that's what we did last time was we,
Yeah.
you have the conceptual discussion, but then if we're gonna have actual changes, we need to take a look at what you put together and then we work off of that.
All right.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Jim.
A question for you, actually probably everyone, is do you think it would be, and this is in regards to common council size, are we able to, or should we poll the current common council members with that specific question about, what they feel about the size of the council now, and would it be helpful to have a larger council? Is that something that we could do, should do? That's the question.
I mean, I think that it would be helpful to have input from the people who are doing the job. I think it was helpful to have that meeting earlier
It
in
was.
the year, right, where but we didn't hear from everybody though.
No.
So I wouldn't be opposed to that at all.
I think it would be just a simple poll, really, sent out to the common council members to help us, give us a little more information about how they feel about it.
I think it's a good idea.
Because I don't
But
know.
I also suggest that I know that we have some common council members. I'm sorry, I'm getting over COVID. Some common council members who are copied to our email correspondence, but they aren't all. It would be great if all of them were, so that we could get that kind of what Jim is talking about, get that kind of like feedback and input from everyone, not just, one or two or three.
Yeah, I think that's why it could be helpful to, we send a poll out to everybody. Specific to that issue. I think, the council members are as welcome as anyone else to send us their comments on anything they want to see in the charter. But I think if we're gonna have the discussion around size, I would be curious to know what the people who, the current membership.
Why don't we
thinks.
propose a joint meeting? Doesn't have to be telecast or a formal meeting, open to the public, or just and if you want to limit it to just to, the council president and the pro tem or whatever, but let's have it,
Well, I think we had that earlier, Carl. Was
Yeah, we did.
not with this group, but we didn't have a meeting.
we had when we were in the community room. We had remember we had
The mayor.
the mayor and council.
Yeah, but we had like 4 members of the council, maybe.
Correct.
Yeah, we had
I
Harry and
remember that.
Yeah, I
Yeah, I
think,
mean, I heard from some of them who weren't able to make it. I mean, they sent me a message, hey, I couldn't come. I think it's, given what they have going on, I think it's gonna be tricky to add another thing to their calendar.
So they all don't
Um,
have to come. We have a meeting, we set, we talk, if 5 of them come and all of us come, or 5, I mean, I realize it's an issue, getting everybody together, but at least we start to get a feel for it, because even if certain council people don't show to that meeting, they'll talk to the other council members about it.
I would suggest that we start with a poll, and then based on what we get from the poll, we decide if Carl's idea is something that we need to do, because if it is, let's do it.
I can acquiesce to that.
Yeah, and I think, as we're coming up on March sooner rather than later, I think we really need to start dialing in on specific stuff. So I think to
Right.
have just a general meet and greet with council members to hear their thoughts on any range of issues is gonna be challenging. I think we need to kind of dial in on this certain specific things, whether it's budget or NPR or council size or whatever, and then go from there.
We
So
did that with the last charter commission,
what's this?
we had a meeting with city council members, if I recall, I think they all attended. And it was in council chambers where you guys are, and all of us were there, and we had a dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, the earlier meeting we had was open to more than were available.
No, not this meeting, when we were on the first charter commission, the one where we did.
Yeah, no, I mean, we'll have meetings with them later on in the spring.
But
I mean,
That's
have
when we
to-
transmitted the that's when we transmitted the charter.
Yeah, we have to put all our revisions together and then
Correct.
we transmit it to them and get feedback and, so we'll
Okay.
definitely have that
So
meeting.
mechanically, Mr. Chair, do you want to send a poll out or do you want me to do it? How do you want to do this?
Yeah, Steve, I'll check with you. I don't, maybe we do it through Darlene or, you
All
know.
right, call me in the morning. Yeah, we can do
Not
it.
Darlene, it's Barbara now.
And,
Yeah.
you know, I'm gonna watch the video again because I thought some people brought up the fact that they wanted. Somebody did because they said there were so many committee meetings and
Yeah.
you're spread kind of thin.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a council member.
As I recall, the question really was not addressed directly by the council members present, that they.
The size issue?
Yeah, the size issue was not addressed.
So let's check it
and,
out.
I'll just check.
um,
I'm gonna,
but I-
I'll watch it.
John, I think you're
I
right.
think it's probably a real
20
simple
degrees
matter
out?
for perhaps the chairman just simply to send an email message to Barbara
I'll
Smith.
talk to Barbara and see what she
Yeah.
would recommend.
And tell her that we would love to get the feedback from the existing 15 council members who wish to share their views.
Yeah, agreed.
Keep it simple.
All right, so let's, we have a couple marching orders here, things to work on for next time. Let's move on. We're not gonna vote on anything tonight. We are gonna do the minutes. So do we have a motion to approve? I think everybody had a chance to review the February.
February 4th.
Yep, a motion to approve the minutes.
I second that.
Okay, do we have any proposed changes, updates, corrections to those minutes? I have a couple. All right, so Tanya's last name, needs to be corrected throughout the document. It should be Rhodes Small. I think it was reversed. And then on section 4A, paragraph 14, I believe it should be Mr. Fairbairn said there were 8 committees and 2 ad hocs, not Mr. Levin. I think that you had said there were more, and then I corrected the number, so I think it says Mr. Levin, should be Mr.
I
Fairbairn.
think people always get the two of you mixed up.
Yeah, very similar.
It's all the
And
time.
then the last paragraph of page 5 should be party to fill the seat, not part to fill the seat. So those were my updates. Did anybody else have any? February 4th.
No.
Okay, so motion to approve with those corrections.
I'll make a motion.
I move.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Ed.
Second.
Thank you, everyone.
All right,
All right.
8:39. All right, thank you guys very much. I will, I'll check back with Steve and we'll get the question out on the council side and come up with a couple things on minority party representation, which I guess could be happening at the same time as the finance stuff with Jared.
Thank you. Take
Thanks,
care,
everyone.
everybody.
Thanks, Steve. Take care.
Tyler, thanks, Steve.
All right, thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.